welcome to Berlinale Talents. We're happy that you all made it, that you made it here, that you made it to our performance stage to present your movie theaters here. And it's my honor to introduce our moderator, Dorothee Wenner. So enjoy the talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I hope this session is going to be inspirational for every filmmaker who doesn't know where to show his or her movie. We have invited 3 initiatives of several which exist and found it like completely fascinating how in today's world a lot of filmmakers and film professionals take matters in their own hands instead of waiting for a wonderful paradise like cinema to open up. Instead, they are finding and creating cinema of their own. So what we have foreseen here is that each and every one shortly presents since when he and she has had the idea. We have little visual material, a little bit of that. We have more in stock in case you want to see more. And then go very much into concrete details of what went right, what went wrong, because in case somebody's here who wants to open a cinema of his own, her own, maybe it's also about, not reinventing the wheel, but to share experiences. With this, I would like to open with CCC, Chile, a country of focus at EFM throughout the Berlin Film Festival. There is a lot of Chile these days, not only on the cars that some people take to shuttle between Potsdamer Platz and EFM. I'm very happy that we have 2 film professionals who opened CCC in Santiago, and that is Catalina Marin Duarte, who is an editor and has been working together with Dominga Sotomayor. She has a film in Forum this year, Mar. 2015. That is 2 years back already? Oh my God. 5 years back. Oh God, I'm losing it. So okay. So okay. Rewind. Both of them have collaborated on the practical practitioner way as a filmmaker and editor, and are part of a larger group of people who are running a space CCC. And I would like you maybe to say a few words before we see some footage of what CC is today. I don't know who of you would like to start.
And so, of course, we being filmmakers kind of encourage us to create a space where we could show our movies, me as an editor, in good conditions. And we start looking for a cinema because our films are shown here in Berlinale, but then in Chile no one saw it. And instead of finding a cinema, we found a house. And we realized that for cinema to work today, we needed to create a whole experience around it. That's where CCC comes from.
Maybe we can watch the video and then...
Yes, okay. Can we see the clip number 1, please?
I want to invite you to open your hearts.
Thank you all. Un gran abrazo para todos. ¡Viva Chile!
El cine chileno está en su mejor momento, ha llamado la atención en el extranjero, se han conseguido muchos reconocimientos para los realizadores nacionales, hay más películas, hay más escuelas de cine, pero al mismo tiempo difícilmente se encuentran espacios y salas para ver películas del mundo y películas chilenas en Chile.
Por otro lado, vemos que todos los cines de nuestra infancia se han ido destruyendo para hacer edificios que no tienen nada que ver con la cultura.
Por eso llega CCC, un proyecto que viene a rescatar el patrimonio del cine y del barrio.
Este barrio necesita una recuperación, es un barrio en deterioro y el edificio puede apoyar fundamentalmente en revitalizarlo, tanto en el uso como de cine, como en los espacios públicos.
Volver a tener un cine de barrio, volver a tener un lugar en que uno se encuentra con sus vecinos o con sus amigos, y es un lugar que en torno al cine te permite tener una experiencia rica y nueva que probablemente se había perdido con el paso del tiempo.
Me ha tocado, por suerte, viajar a hartos festivales o ser jurado de festivales. Uno ve muchas películas que nunca en la vida podría verlas, incluso chilenas.
CCC es un lugar de encuentro y queremos que tú seas parte.
Queremos revivir la cultura de ir al cine y ver una película colectivamente.
So, Dominga, would you share with us when this idea, when you first had this idea, and then when it was, and then what happened? How did you find the collective around you? Was that all very clear with who you collaborated? And give us a little bit, like, in brief, the long journey from first idea to where you stand today.
Sure. So first, we have a production company together, and it's working as a collective as well. We've been doing films in Chile for 10 years, and I think it was like a very nice way of kind of making the films in the way we wanted to make it. And for example, my friend Omar, who is also in the collective, will produce my film, and then I will produce his film, and Kata will edit, like, both of them. So we had this habit to work as a collective, and we always have this dream to have like a cinema. Personally, I had this experience of a cinema that I loved when I was a child. It was a cinema that was close to my grandmother's house, and I lived the experience of how they destroyed this neighbor cinema to make a big building. So maybe that was my like a starting point of like motivation. And then we were like talking with friends because it was something very huge. It was like we wanted to make a cinema. They're not like, or there's just a few cinemas in Santiago that we like to go, or cinemas that are showing Chilean films or international films that we love. And we realized that it was impossible to make it like alone. So we talked each other and with two other friends, and we're starting seeing how this can be possible. And we were lucky to find like an investor. We told him we'd really need like a new house of a Chilean cinema, a place where it's not just a cinema, it's also like a place to meet. It's a point of encounter. And I think it was very key point in the process, because of course it was a dream, but we are filmmakers. We don't have like the money or the resources to make a cinema, and he was a guy that loves cinema, and that it was also connected with this nostalgia of recouping the neighbor experience of having a neighbor cinema. Maybe in your countries or even here it's more normal to have these kind of places. But in Chile, we basically just have like big commercial venues with 96% of North American films on it. So as a filmmaker, it was really frustrated to see how personally I was traveling for different countries with my films. And even in Poland, it will be more successful, my first feature film, than in Chile. So I think as a filmmaker and as an editor, as a production company, we had this dream of reconnecting with an audience. And I think it's a responsibility as a filmmaker, not only to make more films, also to understand that we have to connect with someone and to build spaces. And I'm being a little bit vague, but after that guy come on board, we found a place, and it's a house. And I think it's very important that it's a house, because we wanted to make a house, not just like a cinema. It's a place where people will feel invited. And we were traveling to different cinemas around the world, and it was like a very inspiring thing. We were, for example, in Mexico, in Colombia. Every time that I was traveling with my own films, I was asking the owners of the cinema about how it works. Do you have the restaurant is part of your business plan or not? How many people works here? How many screenings you program at the beginning? How many screenings you have now? So we were kind of accumulating
inspiration and knowledge while we were trying to finance the project. And we got a funding for recouping a house, like recouping heritage. Recovering heritage, is that called?
Patrimony?
Patrimony funding for the government. And we were basically planning to have this place where the heart is a cinema, but the financial plan is not just the cinema. We thought, what else we want this place to have? And so it has offices for rent, it has a coffee, it has places to make workshop. It's a place where the borders between disciplines are kind of blurry also. So we will welcome theater, exhibitions.
Maybe we can see a couple of pictures. There's our Instagram somewhere. And I think it's the second or the third tab where like there's a map. I think it's the next one. Yeah, something that we realized, like looking for other cinemas, is that the neighborhood was very important. So we find this place that it's in a very central place in Santiago, but it's not in a common place. There are not much cultural things to do around it, but still it has like, all the red dots are theaters or cinemas, cultural places. All the green ones are university, and the yellow one are secondary or primary school. So then we found the house, and if we can see the second tab, as Dominga said, she was asking everybody like how's the programming, how's the business plan, but then we start asking also like, how do you create the architectural plans, like very technical, like what DCP, what projector do you have? And so we started, as she said, like with these offices in the second floor. In the first floor are more for workshops. And at the beginning, we are going to have this open air cinema that in the future, we hope it's going to be 100-seat cinema screen. So it still is very small, but it has to do with the kind of audience that we have. That's what I
Thank you
say.
very much. Maybe for the ending, since when is it open for the public, and when did you start from finding the house to opening? How long did it take?
So that's a very important question, I think, because we found the house like 2 years ago, and there were many people living there. So while the people was looking to find like another place to live, we were like working in the project, and we started the reconstruction a year ago, and it took a year. But while we were building the place, we were starting to do things with the neighborhood, and also other activities, like not in the house, but for example, co-production meetings in other places, or screenings one screening in a square. And I had the feeling that the place felt open even before we opened it. So the people of the neighborhood has been very involved, and it's been well received. And we pre-opened it in October, November. So that was the original plan, but we had this social explosion, you say?
Revolution and
I don't know,
everywhere.
Revolution, crisis, process, transition in October. And it's been very important for the project as well, because we lend the place to the meetings of filmmakers in Chile. We are organized as an organization called Ojo Chile, trying to help, trying to portray what is happening in the street and the TV is not showing, trying to do what we can do as a filmmaker with this social crisis. And CCC has becoming the place of encounter, and I think that's beautiful, and in a way transform the original idea that we had. So now it's maybe we have 3 of these meetings per week, and it's something that is been in the heart of the beginning of the project now. I think it's very political. So we are in this soft opening, doing screenings, events. The offices are ready, but we are planning to open in April.
Thank you very much. Very impressive description into your big projects. I see some similarities and also a lot of differences when looking at Boutaina Kazim from Dubai. She has a cinema which is called Cinema Akil in Dubai, which is mainly city-bound, but also related to a nomadic cinema idea. And Boutaina, I would like you to show us a little bit around your venue, what you do in Dubai, which definitely has a completely different city structure than Santiago or Bobo Dioulasso.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what they were saying, rings true. We met in 2014. We're at a very similar stage of wanting to address the similar frustrations of, the lost sort of memories of cinema going, collective experiences, creation of public space. So all of these things rang true for us when we started working on this project. We started as a nomadic cinema, as you were saying. It's something that was a temporary solution that became sort of the heart and soul of what we do. And we traveled with our programming without waiting for a space. We realized very quickly that it would be very expensive, very prohibitive from a regulatory standpoint to open a permanent art house cinema in a country where you had the highest number of multiplexes, screens per capita in the region. You have about 396, I think, is the last count, screens, but all of them being geared towards blockbuster and commercial films. So out of that sort of landscape came the idea to set up an independent cinema that spoke the language of the context that we were trying to speak to, that we were trying to present, and it came out of also a frustration of not being able to see ourselves on screen. And when I say ourselves, it's a very conscious selves in the plural, because Dubai is a very, very diverse city. It's it has the famous 200 nationalities sort of living under in one place, and very rarely do you see representation outside the film festival, which is also now gone, of the cinemas of these of the context of our region. So we really wanted to be a space that created that opportunity to watch cinemas and speak the language of the multiplicities that existed. So we started very early in a very modest sort of setting. I'll show you some pictures, actually. So this is sort of a little bit of a background. I mean, this is what people know Dubai as. This is what you imagine. This is kind of the crazy stuff that happens in the city that we were trying to counter. And this is how quickly the place grew. So just gives you a bit of an idea of the pace that we're dealing with. And these are the cinemas that we knew. I mean, in light of that, these are the things that actually existed, and the people that were used to these kinds of cinema experiences that were now very quickly disappearing. Those became very quickly replaced by cinemas that look like this, and dining experiences and all the fancy sort of trappings. And this is the context in which we operated. This is our consciousness, is the realization, the bird's eye view of where we exist, and the overarching perspectives that govern the way that life exists in the city, that are not necessarily reflected in the images that you see. Those are the people that live in that in that environment. Those are the kinds of experiences, and yet we are still consuming images and representations of the context through blockbusters, whether it's Hollywood or Bollywood or Malayalam cinema or commercial Egyptian cinema that was limited to only that kind of representation. So it really came from that view. And I'll skip this just because I want to just show you how we started. I mean, this is our nomadic sort of experience, which was our first step back in 2014. We started partnering with different spaces and different, everything from galleries to yards to warehouses to different partners, events that we would take over and run limited programs for the public in these spaces wherever we could find it. And then we ran a sort of a testing phase, similar to where I think the CCC is at, but in what became eventually our home. We took over a warehouse for 2.5 months back in 2017 to test out the theory of how an art house cinema would play out on a daily basis in the context of Dubai. It was a warehouse in a sort of an arts community, and we ran the cinema without nailing a single nail into the wall. We put up a screen, we worked with different partners that we rented the equipment from, and set up a cinema for that period. And based on that experience and the feedback that we got from the community, we decided to finally open the space in the same location. And I'll just show you some of the images of the sort of the nomadic iterations. So as you can, this is our very first screening. So as you can see, it's a small space. It's very informal. Even the technical setup was very limited. And this is where we are right now. I mean, we've done over 65 different pop-ups in different parts of the country, not only in the city. And this is just some of them. Some of them are very ostentatious, which we think of as sort of, cine hacking. In very commercial environments, we present films that we would like to, play a subversive role in the context that they're operating. This is one of our screenings that we did on a basketball court. This is a takeover of a heritage district that we took over. This is in Abu Dhabi, which is a different emirate that we traveled to as well and present different programs. And this is our sort of semi-permanent outdoor area that's attached to the same location where our cinema operates. So these are just some images, and I'll just show you our space right now as it exists. Okay. As much as I love Ghassan Kanafani, this is not what I'm trying to show you. Oh, there it is.
Butena, who's we?
We, myself and my fantastic team of three. So, we started, it was a lot of different moving parts, and we started, it was just, in the beginning, it was in 2014, it was just myself, with our different, partners and collaborators, and then my colleague, who's our deputy director at the space, Luz Vijamil, who is a fundamental part of setting up the space, setting up the pop-ups, and she still leads on our nomadic cinema programs. It was two of us for the longest time, and we're now, since we opened in September 2018, we have a projectionist on our team, Saravanan, and Momo, who runs our space coordination in our facility.
We heard about a mysterious investor who became part of that collective. Did you also have someone who came by? Because real estate, we know, is a big topic in Dubai. How did you finance? How did you find the spaces where you are active in?
I like to think of our cinema as funded by sort of a Robin Hooding model, which is a by-profit sort of setup. So we're not a non-profit entity. It's hard to set up a non-profit in the UAE. So we had to find ways of operating in that legal framework. So we're effectively registered as a commercial project, and we work with different sponsors and partners to deliver certain projects. We have a lot of partners that believed in the project. So the Al Serkal Avenue space, for example, that we are in now is based on a long-term partnership, of allowing us to exist rent-free in exchange for programming that we do together and collectively for their foundation. So we've benefited from a lot of sort of, collective, I think shared vision in having a space like this, and that has trickled across the board, whether it's through getting specific projects that would allow us to make some money that we would then save over the course of the 4 years towards investing in the space. But we made a very conscious effort not to be affiliated with an existing entity, not to be affiliated with it, because in the UAE a lot of the projects, the cultural landscape is top down, and a lot of it is government run or state run, and we wanted to exist in an independent form. We can collaborate with with government partners and so on, but in terms of our founding, it was very important for us to remain independent, to remain autonomous, and which meant that we didn't grow as fast as we would have liked, but it also kept us very editorially, I think, malleable and editorially flexible in terms of what we wanted to achieve. So every project became kind of a mini cinema. Every nomadic project became a mini sort of fundraising effort. It became a mini sponsorship. So I can list, over maybe 50 organizations that we've worked with, from corporate to cultural diplomacy initiatives, to nonprofits, to grants that we would apply to. So every project was completely different and funded differently. But essentially, it all pooled into, and we kept our costs very low throughout the 4 years of operation. So that also helped us kind of retain a lot of the capital that we would need to invest in the setting up of the space.
Different from Santiago, in Dubai, there is no tradition. So you don't have like this, when my parents were children, they went to this and that cinema, because it simply didn't exist. Now, at the same time, you were talking about all these traditions, and people who live in Dubai bring in various cinema traditions. I wanted to know from you whether you very consciously choose which tradition other people brought maybe to Dubai that you merged into something new, or is there no historic context and you say, well, we are free to invent our own cinema culture?
It's a little bit of both. I think, the idea of, we don't operate like we're part of a network of cinemas across the Middle East or North African region, and each one of them has a very, very different context in terms of the history of cinema, or cinema spaces even in their countries. I mean, the earliest cinema opened doors in the UAE in 1967, so it's relatively new. But those existed, and they all also carried over traditions of the neighboring countries and the populations that still exist in the UAE. So we have a very strong connection to the Indian subcontinent. So that's something that for us is very big in terms of the way that people go to cinemas, in terms of the cinema that we consume, in terms of the spaces that in terms of even the ownership of these spaces. And a lot of the distribution networks that existed, a lot of them had very strong ties to Indian cinema, and to Bollywood, to Tamil cinema, to Malayalam cinema, and that was primarily what was around. And you had the commercial sort of Arabic language content, and then Hollywood as well. But that was primarily, and it still reigns true. It's still kind of the dominant market. But essentially, it's a little bit of an amalgamation of all these different collective sort of memories, traditions, cinema goings, and then the specificity of how it operated in the city of Dubai, in these spaces that I shared earlier, and like spaces as well. And the third part is a little bit of a playground. It's a little bit of us shooting in the dark and trying to understand, based on the behaviors and based on the feedback and the conversations we would have in our nomadic iterations, what people were looking to for a space like us to offer. how would it operate? A lot of it was, a lot of research, like you guys were doing, traveling different places, and I did a residency here in Berlin, where I visited a lot of the existing, models, different types of cinemas. Everywhere I would go, every person I would meet, I would kind of collect a lot of that information and research. I can show you, folders of many, many years of collections of images, from poster boxes to neon lights to the kinds of seating. But essentially what I realized, and obviously the shared practices of the cinemas that were operating in the Middle Eastern North African network that were part of the NAS network, and those shared sort of best practices and so on. But what you do end up realizing is that the best feedback you're going to get, or the best research base, is from the community, the specificity of the community that you're speaking to. And that's where we found a lot of our inspiration. That's what actually shifted a lot of our focus from what we thought we would do, which was sort of a conventional imagination of what an art house would be, to what we ended up doing. And it informed everything from decisions like the kind of furniture that we had, the kind of space that we had, the decision not to have stadium seating, the decision to have, for example, the gallery, the kind of F&B operation that we have in the space. It was all driven by the idea that we didn't want to parachute an existing model of what an art house is supposed to be, and try to invent something that would also be flexible enough to iterate and to change, as we grow. We never wanted to impose a position of perceived authority or legacy of what cinema going is supposed to be. And also on top of that is, the reality of our time. We're operating in, we started in 2018, and we're operating now where we are betting on a very different kind of medium. As much as I will still always be a hopeless romantic, for the cinema going experience and the cinema halls. There are a lot of shifting sands, so to speak, in terms of the landscape and VOD and what makes a cinema experience. Why do people go to cinema? So those are all questions that we're also constantly navigating and pushing back against. And I hope that that's something we continue to learn and be flexible enough to speak to.
Thank you, Boutaina, for building a very nice bridge to Bernie Goldblatt and his initiative Cinegimbi in Bobo Dioulasso. That is the second largest city of Burkina Faso. This project has been conceived for many, many years, and was the issue that you were mentioning. We cannot just take a model and plant it into our environment, was something absolutely crucial and important in setting up Cinegimbi, as much as it is and was the fact that Bernie is a producer. He has a production house, Les Films du Djaba, in Bobo Dioulasso. He's a filmmaker. He came to Berlin with his film Walai in 2017. I'm correct, no? Okay, for once. This year he's here as a producer of a film in the Forum La Traverse. And the production house has an obvious and a subterranean relation to the cinema, which is a little bit away from where the production house is. But Bernie, please start from the beginning. How did you start Cinegimbi and when?
Okay. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you, Doro. Thank you. It was very interesting to hear your stories. And of course, it reminds me of our own adventure, which began 2012, 8 years ago, with a dream, a crazy dream to refurbish and to put alive an old cinema which was in the deadly situation, like all the other cinemas. So in the city where I live and where I work, and where I learned to make films, there are no more screens since 2005. And the Cinegimbi was the last cinema to close down in 2005. And it was a cinema opened in 1957 during the colonial time. And it was, I mean, a very, very popular cinema with each day around 1,000 people attending the cinema in 1992. This is a figure that I know, which is crazy. and but still it's reality. And so for several reasons, all the cinemas shut down, like in many other African countries, and mostly not because people didn't want to go to cinema, but for external reasons. I will not talk about it too long because it's another subject, but still the reason was not the audience. And so it was a kind of catastrophe which we all lived. And so with a couple of other filmmakers, we started dreaming of this project. And the only remaining place where they didn't transform it into a church or a mosque or a warehouse was the Sinigimbi, which was still there, I mean, in the ruins. And so we started this incredible campaign from Cannes to Durban to Toronto to Sweden to Dhaka, everywhere. I was like with my friends doing activism to raise, first of all, before the money, to raise, to create a network, a supporting network inside the cinema family in which I belong. So festivals, for example, and producers and screenwriters. So because I already did films, I relied on this family to create this big network of support. And then on second time, we started looking for money. The first problem was to buy the land, which was being sold. And so, I mean, we had to find enough money to buy the land, which was very costly, because we are in the center of the city. We are in the middle of a popular area. And the project, as I told you, the cinema was a very popular cinema. They used to screen a lot of Indian movies, cowboy movies, and it was a cheap also and accessible cinema. And from the start, we wanted to keep this color and of course to make a modern cinema, but always to keep in mind that we are in a popular, poor area of the center of the city, which is not, you know, offices and at 6 o'clock everybody goes home. It's surrounded by families, by bars, by restaurants, by people selling, and it's a very lively neighborhood. And so this we wanted to keep from the beginning, and of course this is what we're going to make, and that's why it has, like your project, a very social impact, how do you say, relevance and importance. It was an outdoor cinema with about 1,000 seats, and now it will be one indoor 174 seats and one outdoor 250 seats. Will be 100 seats bar and restaurant, offices, and also meeting rooms. And of course the idea is to make it much more than a cinema. And of course we are in 2020 today, and people have lost the experience of going to cinema in this city. So we are working on several kind of strategies to create, to make this place not only a place where you consume, you know, where you buy a ticket, you watch a film and you go out, but it's also to develop activities, workshops, education for the children, production, writing workshops, distribution workshops, etc. Around this Sinigimbi, and that's why we call it the Sinigimbi Hub, because it will become more of a hub than only a cinema commercially wise.
The Sinigimbi already has a bus stop, but you didn't mention it's not yet operating. It's going to open in 2020. Bernie, maybe for the beginning also you could give us an idea of how you work. You emphasize, like Butena, that you do have a lot of social interaction, as you also said. It's very, very important that we relate to the immediate neighborhood, to the specific of our place where we operate from. If you could say, how do you relate to the neighborhood, to the quartier where the cinema is going to open soon.
Okay, inside the team we have people from the neighborhood, in the immediate executive team, and right from the start we always, whatever happens inside the project, whatever big decisions we make, we always go to inform and to take also the ideas of the community leaders, religious leaders, youth leaders, women leaders. It's the Burkina Faso, the cities work a lot as a lot of like the villages. So if you don't do like this, of course, your project will never work out, because the idea is that we are not building a bank. I mean, we are giving life to a very popular place, and we wanted to get it back like this. Mm-hmm. So I give an example. There was a market. There was a market held by about 80 women selling vegetables and fruits during 50 years behind just next to the cinema. And because we started to construct the whole construction in 2015, there was a problem with this market because it disturbed, of course, the whole work. And all of the people who were skeptical about the project, they said, you will never do this because this market, you will never find a way to move it. So we had discussions with those women during 3 years. And so we moved it one early morning. We didn't, but they did. They moved their own market very smoothly in 2 hours' time. And 100 women just moved to another area that they have chosen and that we have refurbished. We have planted trees. We have done the whole thing clean. Just this is an example to say how it is important for us to work with the people and not only for them. So the ideas are taken in common.
You can also say that there was a bit of juju involved, if you want to.
No, but it was very politically very, very tense. Also, it was a time where we had our dictator, which was being swept out by a revolution, and we didn't have any president, and it was a time of a very political tensity. And the next day when the market moved, the people from the government called me and say, well, how did you do that? We didn't see any journalists, and I said, no, I didn't invite you to watch how this went out. But just to say that our first clients to the cinema will be those people, of course. So we need them as they are part of this whole project and idea of a social, economical, and also environmental project.
Can we see some pictures of Cinegimbi, please?
With the little spotlight, right?
Yeah. So I think the basic idea of talents is learning from experiences, and sometimes those people who are sitting that side get depressed because, oh God, so much work ahead of us, and these people did so much right. I would like to start therefore the first round in you all sharing with us some decisions that you took in the course of this very, very long initiative, which you regret today, and what you would have as advice for those who think about maybe opening their own cinemas somewhere in the world. Be very precise with an example and share with us, if it's possible, something that you regret and what you would do differently if you would start again. I don't know. Do you want to start, Bernie? Okay.
I would say, don't do as we did. I'm a filmmaker, and I'm a dreamer, and so I dreamt the project. Okay, we will open this year, but we didn't begin the good way. I mean, you know, I think we waited for 5 years to make a, how do you say, business plan. I don't even know how to say it. So this, at one stage, the only thing, you know, when you meet with people who will, you know, give you money, it's good to be serious. So we raised about 1 million euro without any business plan. So this is how I became serious in front of those guys, because they said, wow. I said, yes, I did it. So, but this is not something that, you know, it's not a model, of course. And you should begin with this, I think, because it's very important. And this is how now we are able to finish the whole project. Is, yeah, the business plan is very important. And now I can really know exactly, give figures to things. But in the beginning, it was, I think the people loved this dream, okay? But it has a limit, and I think if I have to do it again, I will do it a little bit differently in this way.
Jenna, you said you were a romantic, but I'm sure in Dubai, without a business plan, you can't even leave the house. Is it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I meant by this Robin Hood sort of model that we had to work with, because a lot of our time was, you know, and it was, you know, it was useful that, you know, we had myself and my colleague, you know, had worked in, you know, sort of corporate environments. We kind of knew the language that the Dubai speak. We knew how to go to, you know, different meetings. We knew what events there were. We kind of, you know, had to work within an existing framework and then, you know, do our own thing. So we weren't trying to kind of reinvent a wheel or impose something that wouldn't work. We knew the lingo, we knew the tools, you know, and we knew also, you know, what events are there that had, you know, a certain kind of, you know, appeal, what kind of captive audiences existed within the environment that Dubai creates that we can then hack into, and then we can, you know, we can kind of, you know, sort of take a piece of that conversation and hopefully leave an impact that maybe would have been left vacuous. So an example of that is, you know, for example, Seoul DXB, which is the event that I showed in the basketball court. You know, it's sort of a, you know, very commercial, like hip-hop lifestyle convention where, you know, sneakerheads gather to buy all kinds of stuff, and, you know, it's completely removed or devoid of any kind of historical trajectory. And what we decided to do was, you know, work with them on a screening series that would focus on, you know, on films that looked at, you know, the history of those movements that then gave life to this, you know, sort of the sort of superficial interpretation of what these things represent. So, you know, for example, we showed a film by Henry Chalfant, Style Wars, which looked at the history of street art and graffiti. We showed Fresh Dress by Sasha Jenkins, which, you know, shows the sort of, you know, historical, social, political movements that gave birth to what you're experiencing in the city today. And that became kind of a trend of what we were trying to do, is, you know, how do we find the opportunities that already exist on a very specific level, and then, you know, use them as a sort of as a springboard, you know, to have a deeper conversation or represent different kinds of cinema. What you should not do, so much. I mean, I think part of it was there was a lot of, because of this, you know, lack of precedent. We spent a lot of time, you know, doing research and trying to find the right models and and I mean, that was good in terms of understanding the landscape. So I know, I looked at all the models that I could think of, you know, from our region and beyond, and, you know, different cities, and what art houses are supposed to be, and, you know, and I have all the literature, and it became a very useful sort of playbook in terms of, you know, the different, you know, challenges that you would encounter. But, you know, effectively, there is no blueprint. You know, there is no model that, you know, you can then parachute and then you can use as a starting ground. I think the thing that, you know, you bet on is the confidence in the communities that you speak of, is the, you know, the sort of the understanding that you have of your landscape, and you really have to zero in on that. We started off in the beginning with a very different kind of project. You know, it was supposed to be a 2-screen space, completely, you know, done up in a specific language of art house, and, you know, and all the nostalgia that people, you know, sort of rally around in terms of understanding what an art house aesthetic is supposed to be, even, or art house experience is supposed to be. And I think, you know, we had to shed a lot of that, and a lot of it became trial and error. And in that trial and error, we sort of started to adjust, and still be aware of the numbers. I think that was something we had to do from the very get-go, is how much it's going to cost, because every step in Dubai is expensive. So we had to get a very clear understanding of the legal frameworks. We had to get a very good understanding of, of how we would register, of what the potential revenue streams would be, and be realistic about that in order to sustain it in the long run, and also be realistic about the kind of sort of the restrictions that we would potentially face in terms of the sort of editorial language of what we were trying to present. So, I would love to open a space that does only forum expanded films, and just do a lot of experimental cinema, but an understanding of the habits and the cinema going habits and the appetite of the audiences, helped us create a balance, helped us create a formula that we then still adjust. So no rules, effectively, just know the landscape.
Catalina and Dominga, if you would be so honest to share with us some of those moments.
I totally agree with you, but I think we will learn a lot this year, because we're starting. We're like a little bit like in a soft opening for the whole year, and I think after a year we will learn so much. So I think it's very good to don't have like a fixed idea. We had this fixed idea of starting as we wanted to be. So we wanted to have like a proper cinema since the very beginning, because we thought if we don't have like a perfect cinema, then it never will be like this, and people will relate our place with a mediocre but quality place. But then I think we can start with simple. I mean, it's much simple. I remember the day we made the first screening. It wasn't even inside the place. It was in the square. And it wasn't very good quality. And then there were like some neighbors bringing their chairs, and there were like some people coming, and something happened there that I thought, this is enough also. And then Alejandro is here too, and he's producing with CCC with us, and we had this idea to make a Christmas for kids. So everybody will bring some things to share, and we'll show Home Alone. It was the film that the kids wanted to see. And it was very simple screening. And then the kids were asking every week, when is the next one? When is the next one? So we were like kind of, okay, we don't have the cinema. We can start with doing like very simple screenings in a wall, and the kids were super happy, like sharing like a fruit or like, and maybe this is also like a way of starting. You don't need to have like an investor. Also, it sounds like we had a big investor, but what we had actually was the starting point. We had an investor for having the house, which was very important, but now we also have to see how we will run the place. We still need to pay for the renovation, for the management. So I think we were lucky to secure the starting point, because if not, we also don't want to be based just in public fundings, because it's very fragile, and we want this to last. So I think we have to mix models, and there is no one model. And in Chile, our reality is very different too. We were in cinemas in Rotterdam, in Amsterdam, and they were saying, you have to have at least 3 screening rooms, at least like 2, or at least, and we were like, yeah, but maybe this is different, because in Chile, nobody is going to the cinema, and if I have a full room of 30 seats, maybe in my reality, it might work too. So I hope we will learn during this year some other stuff.
I think this is very interesting, and probably something that you 3 here as representatives of new inventions of cinema spaces, is that there is the place which need to be built, and architects and business plans, but you also need to grow the film scene that later on will use the house. Otherwise you build a very beautiful cinema with 3 screens, and then who is coming?
I was going to say, to add to that, is the only thing I would advise, because I spend a lot of time meeting people who run different cinemas, and there's a lot of programs, that look at art house experiences. There's a great project called Tour de Cinema, which you can use as a reference, that looks at a survey of different art houses that have opened up all over Europe. But the one thing I would say is, have specific fundamentals that you won't compromise in, and then everything else is up for grabs. You know, for us it was, you know, the decision was to be on a street-facing location, so to be accessible from a street on a street level, and the technical setup, that was the one thing I wasn't going to compromise on. And the third thing was to have an F&B component that was relevant to what we were doing. Those were the three fundamental sort of ingredients, and everything else became porous. So just decide what your things are going to be, and then. Yeah.
I can add that I think we spend a lot of time like thinking in things that we shouldn't have thinking at the beginning, like what kind of juices we wanted to sell in the bar, like what color will be the toilet.
We had the menu.
We had the menu, we were discussing, no, it has to be vegan. Or so it was fun, but I think we were like really into the details at the beginning, and then of course we realized, I personally don't want to run a restaurant, for example. I want to make a cinema, so maybe it's better to get like some good partners who wanted to make a restaurant or who wanted to make workshops, and you can focus in what you think is your like main thing.
In that sense, I think you can regret so many things, like the business plan. I feel very like this, like I shouldn't be being kind of a lawyer, an architect, a constructor, or like an administrator. So I hope this year someone else gonna take charge of it. But I think, for example, another good decision is that one good decision is that we decided like to create a community before, not only in sense of screenings, but also with the film community, like making a small market of co-production, making workshops. So I think at the end, we are doing everything at the same time, but it's still like a business. And
something that you also mentioned, that you have like the support of the industry, and I think for us it's the first cinema run for filmmakers. So I think we had a network that we can use. We create this international board for CCC, which is like symbolic, but it exists. So they're like directors of festivals, programmers, distributors, and we can call them, or they can send like a
very cool idea you had. I saw the other day you were giving like a permanent pass to my colleague Christine Tröstrom, who then very proudly showed.
I have one for you. Can
yeah.
I go and look for it?
This is the moment.
This, by the way, is a very nice marketing thing in case somebody wants to do this. I think here are the ideas that really, you know, bind you as a cinema lover to another place. Bernie, for instance, had like this, he was running around all the time selling chairs in a cinema. The seats are sitting there.
There are still some available in case. 300 euros.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That all, you know, I think there are lots of ways of, you know, making the thing work internationally. What I want to know from you, I'm sure all of you had more than once this moment when you said, oh, had I not had this idea, because I want to make my next new film. And I know there are a lot of filmmakers here who think, oh God, they are brave enough to open up a cinema, but how can I manage to do this? I wanted to know, how do you make those filmmakers who think somebody else is in charge of opening up a cinema to show their films, how do you make them part, and how do you make them feel responsible for also, you know, we as people who live in an environment that is differently organized than, for instance, Berlin, even though we also have a lot of cinemas here that are run by filmmakers, how in more difficult to navigate places, you make sure that the community, the filmmaking community, feels like it's our responsibility. When Catalina and Dominga are embarking on their new project, we volunteer and take over for some time. Or when Bernie is doing his new film, and you are kind of full-time, no? In Cinema Aquile.
Myself?
Yeah.
No, I have a day job, which I don't speak of.
Okay, so we hear about that later, but that's also a conflict zone, I would guess. To look at what you're doing as a night job, you have to be very, very productive. I don't know who wants to... Yes, please do. You start.
I think none of us here, I think, did this because we want to have a job. We're not looking for a job through this project. Of course, I can not see myself sitting next to the Cinegimbi every night and saying hello to the audience and presenting films. This is not mine. I'm making films, but it's important to have a team. And the time we have taken, 8 years, to construct and to raise money, it's also this time that we have taken to organize the future management of this project, of this place. So you don't need to be a filmmaker to open a cinema, not at all. I had the dream with my friends, but once the cinema will open, I hope by between June and September 2020, of course I will be there at the very start. Of course I will stay the artistic director because I will have a strong look on what we are going to program, but that's it, not more, because otherwise I will not be able to make my films, and otherwise I will be frustrated. So the idea is to create a team, management team, which is strong enough to run the place. So I think we cannot do everything in the same time, but you can have the vision, and then once the place is open, then you can step back a little bit. And if you rely on people, and I think we are not many. Sometimes people call, say, hello, can I speak to the secretary of the Cinegimbi? It's me. Can I speak? It's me. Hello, hello. So, how many are you? We're like 40, 50? No, we are 4. Oh, really 4? So we are multitask people, but we have to remain multitask while we are going to run the place. But yeah, this is what I
mean, one thing about the specificity of where we work is, at the end of the day, yes, Dubai is home to a lot of people, but it's also home to none. In many ways, it's largely 90% of the population is expatriates. They don't actually, they don't live there permanently, or they're not entitled to live there permanently. So there's a lot of transient experiences and different ways of, investing in the city. And part of building, or betting on a community initiative or something like an art house cinema requires a larger, political or civic or, collective sort of, sentiment or investment in a place. And that's something that's maybe a very specific thing that that is the nature of the landscape that we're operating in. But what it does mean on ground is that it's allyship and supporters or pro bono work or a larger community building or a larger community stakeholders in making something like this come true are very rare. It is something that is a very lonely sort of place to do. Everybody loves it when it's done, and everybody comes to it, and everybody says, look, this is my favorite place. I bring all my friends when they come to visit me to Dubai. But ultimately, in terms of actual collective work and community work that is the blood life of running places like this that a lot of cities sort of benefit from. We don't necessarily have, and we have to create a lot of them. Not to say there isn't a lot of sort of qualitative support, not to say there isn't a lot of patronage in terms of our cinema goers or different partners that believe in the cinema experience and bringing us into those events that we speak of. But in terms of the day-to-day, whether it's it's legal advice, whether it's the cost of building, whether it's it's real estate negotiations, whether it's contracts, whether it's even film rights. I mean, that was another thing, is that we have the Dubai taint, so we had one of the biggest loudest film festivals in the region that spent a lot of money, or looked like it spent a lot of money, and we were trying to operate this as well. Yeah, you would know. We're trying to do this on the side, and the moment that you send somebody an email, a sales agent in Paris, that I'm an independent cinema in Dubai, you get slapped with a $2,000 screening fee, and it becomes a very hard place to navigate.
You can go through us now. Burkina Faso.
I can say it's our partners. That's exactly the value of partnerships.
You have nothing, all right.
So there's a lot of lobbying that you have to do, you know, a lot of lobbying and a lot of kind of, you know, contextualization that you have to do to kind of to remove it from the sort of the larger environment that you're operating from.
We had exactly the opposite problem. It was, okay, I came to Germany, for example, and I said, look, we want to refurbish a cinema in Burkina Faso. Where? Where is Burkina Faso? First problem. And then I said, it's West Africa. Africa, but people they're starving, right? And I said, no, they're not starving, but but why with cinema? Look, there AIDS and all those problems, and you want to build the cinema, you're crazy. I said, you see, so this was very, very tough also, opposite problem.
We have a little bit of both, where either, you know, people don't go to the cinema, they don't understand cinema, they have no history, there's like nothing, or, you know, you're a desert. Or there's the opposite, where, you know, you have everything and you're so rich and you don't need our support. So it's this kind of finding this very uncomfortable space where you're like, I'm just doing my thing, I'm just trying to operate the cinema, you know. So there's a lot of that, but that's where allyship really comes into handy, and that's why a lot of our partners that, you know, have helped us from the beginning have really become, you know, fundamental to our growth, whether it's, you know, identifying community spaces that are betting on this, you know, dying horse the way that we are, and, you know, doing programming together and, you know, cooperating on, you know, on certain initiatives, whether it's a larger network of cinemas that we're part of in the region, the NAS network that I keep mentioning. There's cinemas in Beirut, in Khartoum, and in Tangier, and all over the place, and actually having that shared, whether it's knowledge, whether it's, you know, collective negotiation, which actually comes in handy to, you know, secure a larger sort of, you know, programming slate, whether it's sharing even access to talent wherever we can. Those things become incredibly valuable, and I think that's one thing that I would say to anybody trying to do this is really, you know, is
part of a larger association network.
And cultivate your allies, absolutely.
Yeah. So the other day at EFM, I was asked by an Indian producer, how did you Berliners have this idea to have Chile as a country in focus? Are there any Chilean films? We've never heard about this. So it was like I'm sorry for, I won't say the name, but it was like this thing of coming from the biggest film industry in the world to look at such a comparatively small cinema landscape. And I was trying to defend and saying, well, this might be a very, very good idea, particularly in this year, and particularly because the filmmaking scene in Chile might be small, but might be therefore at times be more effective than some of the associations existing in India.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of making the focus in Chile, I think it was before the social explosion. And I think it's very significant right now. I mean, supporting the freedom in cinema, for me, it feels like supporting democracy. We are in a country where human rights are being violated like now, and it's a very difficult moment. So I think also what happened is usually we travel a lot with our films, or Sebastián Leo got an Oscar, but in Chile, I don't think in Chile people really valorate culture. Or it's coming like really after someone winning an Oscar, or like doing this in Berlin, or like someone being in Cannes, but it's always like later. So I hope this visibility of Chile in Berlin will have like a repercussion, you say, like a impact back in Chile in a time that is very fragile. And also mainly for culture, because it's the same. It's like in a country where we need to change the constitution, where there have been like thousands of dead people not thousands, but a lot of people killed in the last 3 months, where we don't know what will happen in this very difficult year that we have ahead. Like, why to make a film also? And I think this is connected with what you were asking before. I mean, I feel I'm mainly a filmmaker, but I'm moved by ideas that comes real, and I don't want to make too many films. I'm okay doing just the films that I need to do while and I'm really convinced for an idea, maybe after 5 years, But making CCC has been very concrete and grounded, and it's something for me very rewarding. It's like making a film, but it's not just then in a box of a DVD or 2 years traveling for festivals. It's a place where people will go, like, I hope forever, and we've been spending like 3 years of our life in this project. Now it's great that it's more? 4. And I also hope to have like a great team. Then I will be like a little bit like you. Like, this is my goal, to be like artistic director and being connected, but also like not every day there, because I also wanted to continue making films and having a life. But I think because of this work, people in Chile, other filmmakers also valorates a lot that CCC is happening, and they wanted to collaborate. So I think we've been trying to open the doors since the developing process, and other filmmakers are really like thankful of this place to exist. And so we are always like inviting people to teach, to be part, to collaborate, because I feel lucky that I know a lot of people. I've been traveling with my film, so in a way, it's my way of como ser una bisagra, like being like, I've been able to be like a bridge of also these possible fundings and my country, and it's my way of doing it.
I lost my mic. And also, for example, all the people that's coming to the market, the Chilean people that, I don't know, maybe 60. So they have known, most of them, CCC, they were looking for an office, they've been for gathering for social stuff. So a lot of people is asking us to show their films because there's not enough room, for example, especially in documentary. So it's happening the same like with women, like some kind of curation, like, or editorial line is starting for what it's needed, like, there's this 4 women project, very interesting that no one's going to show. And so it's like, maybe it's kind of, I'm worried that maybe sometimes we won't be able to show all the films. But still we have a new room for this kind of thing, and we know the people, and they know we have the experience of not being seen, for example. I think that's very nice to understand.
Are there maybe any questions to these experts and to the experiences that, yes, please.
2 questions. Wow.
2 questions. I'm not sure, do we have a microphone or not? Yes, here it comes. It's being thrown, but fear not.
Thank you very much for this very inspirational talk. I'm from the cinema. I'm a very cinema-field person myself, and I was wondering if, although you're working very closely with your communities, if there were also voices who were critical in terms of gentrification, because you're creating such a hip place, and all these, I think it's not like just Dubai or Santiago, like Berlin, everywhere in the world. Gentrification is a very difficult topic, and has there been voices like this, and how did you deal with this?
I think I was worried more than the people around us. I was very worried about it. And I think we think that what's going to happen is that the people that don't live in the neighborhood, like maybe live in more posh areas, they will want to go once a year or a couple of times, but they will go just for specific things. But our cinema is a neighborhood cinema. So our work is for the community of filmmakers. So we are not working, I think we are working with the advice of our neighbors. And I think that this fear of being critics on the gentrification, right now it's been very nice how the filmmaker community took part of it, like they became part. And I was afraid that maybe they wouldn't like the screens, or maybe sometimes you know everybody and you don't like that person. And it has felt like they all really want us to exist. And also we have a great opportunity with this neighborhood because as someone says in the video, it's deteriorating. I don't know how, like the neighborhood is falling apart, but in terms of building very high buildings. But at the same time, it's like a totally new neighborhood in the sense that we have a great migration, especially of people from Venezuela. So, and we have a school next door that it's like 60% or more immigrants. So I think all the people around us is new. So we are part of this new scenario. And we have the possibility to create this neighborhood together. So I think we're going to do well about that.
For us, I think this is the biggest danger that we will try not to fall into, because from the beginning, the idea, as I said, is to have a social, economical, and environmental immediate impact of the cinema, which is an idea which was born there, and it was not parachuted from elsewhere. And if it's, if it's a place for rich or for whites or for the bourgeois, then we will have failed. And the whole spirit of the project is not to fall into this trap, of course. So we will really try our best to focus and to stay a very accessible, popular, but a quality place. This is the challenge. It's not because we are in a poor country that we will have poor quality services. On the contrary, the idea is that we can propose quality services but accessible in terms of price, but also in terms of content. And this is very important. And also, the biggest, for us, the biggest project we have is towards the schools. We want to have 50,000 children every year attending screenings, but not only screenings, but also, how do you say, éducation à l'image? I don't know how we say in French, but it's a program where you follow the children, cinema education, and especially in a country where there are no more cinemas, so it's 15 years. The children who are today 15 have never gone to a cinema in this city. So it's very important also to give this possibility, and it's also part of the whole, and we want to be part of the whole educational system also. Yeah.
And also just to give another example that Bernie explained to me was when it comes to this market story that he explained in the beginning, they were also asking the women who work in the market, well, would you be interested in coming into the cinema? And they said, yes, but we can't go at night. So they were asking, when can you go? And they said, well, the only time we would be free is to see a film 9 o'clock in the morning. So if I understand you correctly, there will be one slot in the cinema specifically curated time-wise and content-wise for the market woman who, you know, this was one way of convincing them to move the market to 300 meter further down the street. But I think this, this concept of relating to the audience for who you are making this is one chance of trying to counterbalance the danger that you, for very good reasons, have brought up. Do you want to add something?
I mean, it's just a very quick thing because we're not really located in a residential area. The whole project that we exist in, the warehouse that we're in, is a cluster of warehouses that was an exception to the way that the area was zoned. It's a re-export zone, it's a factory area, it's an industrial zone. There's no residential spaces there. There is, though, a risk that we're very conscious of right now in becoming kind of too known for our own good, not just us, but also our neighbors, and kind of defining what is even looked at, especially with a lot of international media attention on, the undiscovered gems of Dubai or the hipster Dubai or whatever that, is being now, infatuating a lot of coverage of the city. And what our worry is that we're trying to, very vocally kind of counteract is that this becomes a new sort of spotlight on the area, which is an industrial area, to change it into repurpose it and to gentrify it and to introduce new regulations that will then create room for for the dismantling of what the actual economies that exist there are, which are primarily like maker spaces and factories and industrial areas and that sort of thing.
There were more questions, and can you pass the mic, please?
So maybe I can follow up a little bit on that was brought up of film education, and we do a project here in Berlin called Citizen Kino, to start a territory of media education and media navigation. And Butena brought up a great term, we use this a lot, cinema hacking. But I'm wondering if you all are thinking about some of the crises that we have dealing with in education or our day-to-day world, is that we're being very colonized by screen culture. And so what we do in our programs is that we're actually trying to hack the cinema culture a little bit, because the digital industry has gone into a very colonial territory, some kind of techno-colonialism going on. And we feel like it's very necessary to bring into cinemas a very interactive kind of setting rather than a passive downloading of information from screens. And so there's multiple ideas. We're always experimenting with this, and one of them is to break up the films and talk in between, to engage people in constructing the things that we're going to screen on a particular night. But all of these things, in order to really take us away sometimes from this two-dimensional world that has really colonized us in many ways, we need to figure out how we're going to kind of back out of all of this screen culture that has become very addictive. And because we're all being sold devices with screens on them, and it's being used in new ways. We need to think about the new context of our problems in society right now, and to make our culture less passive and less taking information directly from the screen. So if you've thought about that, those ideas.
I think for us it was in the origin of the project, like thinking, okay, you can stay at home, like watching a very good quality of film. How can we make attractive again the idea of going to the cinema? What can we build around the cinema that is not just the cinema, it's maybe like a place of encounters, no? A place to meet someone, to buy a book, to work a bit, to, I don't know, to have like personal interactions. So this is our main goal, and we have kind of some rules for the first year, and for us it's like to make cinema touchable. Like we will never have like just a screening. It will be like a screening with a talk, or maybe a screening with like music later, or like with someone from the crew, or with a little reunion. So it's something that we've been like thinking a lot, and it's part of our goal. And we can talk about the...
Also, like the beginning of the project is also that we want people to see Chilean films and other kind of films. And so like in Chile, there's like a bad tradition. Everybody thinks Chilean cinema is really bad. And if someone goes to see one Chilean film and it was actually bad, he will never go again in 10 years. In school, like we didn't have like the dictatorship of Pinochet really took like only movies from the States, so it's very attached, that culture. So we always thought working on creating new audience. And this year we got a funding for a project where we want to kind of teach people to curate or to critique. So we're going to create a brigade or a group of people from the neighborhood that they are going to be the ones to lead the Q&A. So they will be part like of not only the audience, but also like they're going to interact, as you say.
Yes.
I think what you said is very important also now with all those social media and fake news and all those kind of shit happening, and especially in a country like Burkina Faso, there's a real danger on how the image, the people, as I said, there's no more cinema, so people are like here, everybody's on the screen, but there's no education on how, what is the sound, what is the image, how can you analyze, and how, nothing. And so the people just, you know, eat the information without, I mean, most of them, without really analyzing. And this is the big danger for the new generation, of course. So this is also part of our program. It's not only education of cinema, but it's also image awareness and how you construct and analyze, and how, because of course now West Africa is the favorite ground for fake news. It's the place where the fake news are working the best. Is in Africa now through social media.
Are you sure about that?
I'm quite sure, because we'll talk about it.
But the one thing I will say about that sort of cinema hacking, for our context, is actually the opposite. Like, we are bombarded constantly with, you know, Dubai is like this hyper-futurist sort of model that's, you know, constantly testing a lot of different technologies. So our existing, whether it's, you know, VR or the Museum of the Future and all these different things, you know, our actual active resistance is to create a place of, you know, of respite and a space of, you know, of surrender to cinema, and then, you know, lead by human interaction, lead by, you know, conversation, lead by, you know, insisting on having a box office that's run by people rather than, you know, augmented, you know, sort of platforms. And not to say that we're in resistance to it. We acknowledge it and we address it through our programming. But I do think that in a context that you're bombarded with all these insistences on reinventing, you know, the way that the medium operates, there is a sort of an alternative that is, you know, that breaks a certain isolationist sort of zeitgeist by presenting things that insist on slowness and coexistence, and not having seats that are assigned, for example, is like, you know, one way that we thought about it. Rotating gallery was another way that we thought about it. Having markets when we do different festivals where we invite members of the community to, you know, to exhibit and to participate in a film program that isn't necessarily your orthodox sort of film festival format. Opening up the cinema space, we have a big window actually into the cinema, which I haven't come across in other places, that we open up during the day. You know, we have this huge sort of, huge wall of constant sunlight into a cinema room that allows people to come in and use it as a big living room, so that during the day it's not really like closed off as a black box. And we can black it out. It does have that possibility, but those are different things that we wanted to kind of think about in terms of how does the cinema live on in today's moment when your alternatives or your status quo is, you know, the Atmos, is the, you know, is all kinds of different sort of, you know, technological disruptions and interventions in the mode. What are the human elements that you can also, you know, insist on to create something different that will always kind of bring people into the cinema space?
I think we have time for one last question. Two questions. Maybe not too long. Yes. Oh.
Hi. How do you feel like, because of the countries that you live in, was it more easier to create the cinemas? Because I live in London, but I would want to create one possibly in Jamaica, like where I'm from, but I don't live in Jamaica. Do you think it's much more easier to kind of like create it where you live, or not, basically?
Yes. Yes, I mean, if you have this project, I think it's a great project to create a cinema in Jamaica, of course, but then I think that if you are the initiator, if you are the engine behind it, you should move to Jamaica for some time. Very, very difficult to do things by distance, especially when you are the face. You are the mind and you are the engine behind this. It's very, very difficult. I know several programs which failed because of this. I have a friend, very well-known filmmaker, African filmmaker, who wanted to do the same thing, but he didn't live in Mali. He lived in Paris. it never went. He got a lot of money, but it never went through because of this problem. I think that it's very important for you to be there and to understand exactly the daily problems, the daily life. People have to see you. And then, when it's, when it's on the tracks, you can go back to London and do other things. But in the beginning, I think very important to have an involvement. You have to sleep there, you have to eat there, you have to be there, and people have to be convinced, because it's, it's like a film that you make, you have to fight for it. And when you pitch your film, nobody can do it at your place. You cannot stay at home and say, please, can you pitch for my film? And then, it's no way. It's your own project, it's in your stomach, it's in your head, in your heart, and people will also give credit because you are from there, and you are, and this is my, really, you have to go there.
So maybe the last question. I saw, it didn't.
I wanted to add something to the answer to the past question. I also work in CCC.
Okay, so you want, yeah.
So regarding how do we face the technological colonization through like digital media, one thing we're talking about now as a group is our main ideas, and one thing I think we have agreed on is that we don't have spectators, like a passive audience. We always have participants in our activities. So that's like one thing we want to keep in all of our activities. Like every time there's a screening, there's something afterwards. We want to see our audience like that. But also I think it's very important to address the fact that the culture is changing. And for example, we have talked with the kids in the neighborhood. I personally asked them, like, what do you want us to do here at CCC? And they always say, like, a Fortnite championship, or like YouTuber day. We want to learn how to be YouTubers, or VR. And we can be like, no, only 16mm films. But we have to think of how to incorporate these new challenges to what we're doing, and also be open to seeing what we can learn from this and how we can be involved and maybe bring something new to the table.
Very nice. This was a good way to wrap up this session. It is up to me to say a very big thank you to Dominga, Catalina, Bernie, and Butaina for your presence here, for your honesty in sharing good and bad experiences, and particularly also for your persistence and for keeping cinema alive in the various places where you're active in. And thank you all for coming and joining this session. Have a nice afternoon.